Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets video in Practical Sheets. Today, I'm going to create another drop-down video, but today we're going to do a very special thing. First, I'm going to create all the drop-down from scratch. So I'm going to have a create first drop-down function that creates the first drop-down. All of the data is brought from this sheet called source data. So I have the data for my first dropdown, for my second, and if you want to do more, you could do them. So everything is created from scratch, even the data validation. And then what I'm going to do is to, do a classic dependent dropdown. For example, if I select Microsoft Office, it brings the options from Microsoft Office. The nice thing is that I'm going to do a custom function that is created all by code. And if I select custom, it will erase the dropdown and let me write another thing, Lotus, whatever. Okay, so this is the nice thing, that if I already have selected something, then I could choose custom or just delete it if I want, and it will delete the validation and it will delete the content. So it's a really nice, more flexible dropdown that it not only lets me have dropdowns, but it also lets me not have anything if I want, write whatever I want without damaging my data validations and without having to write them here and all that. So it's going to be really fun, and to practice a bit again doing data validation with code. I think now I can do it. So I know you love it, but before we start, I want to invite you to go to the Patreon page where you can download this template and use it from scratch, and more than almost 100 videos in the channel now. You can download all of them and ask me anything in the Patreon page. Thank you so much, and let's begin. So let's begin. We have 4 categories here, and we're going to use just 2 or maybe even 3. And the first one we need is this first dropdown. Actually, I'm going to do one thing I've never done before, is do it from the beginning with code. I don't need to do anything. It just sources it all completely from the beginning. It could be nice, so you have to skip this step if you're going to copy the function to another sheet or something like that. So let's go to extensions, app script. Let's call this ultimate dropdown. So first I need to know where I'm going to create the dropdowns. That is this dropdown sheet. And then I also need to know where I'm bringing the data from, this source data. So let's do both. For it, the first thing I need is my connecting to my file. So let's call this spreadsheet, and it will be spreadsheet up dot get active spreadsheet. Next, we're going to connect to our first to the dropdown sheet. That's named dropdown. So dropdown sheet, it will be spreadsheet dot get sheet by name, and I need to, in quotation marks, put the name of the sheet. And let's also create the other sheet, that is the data sheet, where I'm bringing all the data for the dropdowns, and it will be spreadsheet dot the same get sheet by name, and it's not dropdowns, I think it's called source data. Okay, to create the first dropdown, I'm going to need to bring the data from source data. So let's do datasheet dot get data range and get values. This will be my data. Now I can use from this data wherever I need. For example, for the first dropdown, I'm just going to need the first column. I will remove the duplicates and put it in a list, in an array. How do I do this? I will do data. I will do a filter. First I'm going to remove the headers from data with this shift. Okay. Then I'm going to put this inside. For now, let's log our data. And let's put a title to this. Let's run. and give our permissions. This is logger.log and run again. And here I have my data. Excellent. But now I only need the first value of each of these rows because I only need the first column. For this, I'm going to use a method called map. And in map, I'm going to extract the first argument or element of each row. How? I say, this is what is called a callback function. So the argument I'm going to iterate through is going to be called row. And for each row, that is each element of this data, this will be the first element, this will be the second element, this will be the third element. For each of these elements, I'm going to extract the first element of the first sub-element. So how do I do it? Just as easy as saying row in the position 0. Now I'm going to store this. I could store this in the same data, but I'm going to need this data later. So let's do another variable that is called first list or something like that. It could be here, in our case, could be suite, the first category. I like to be more specific with my names in the variables, but this will work for now. Let's see our first list. The reason I'm putting this inside these brackets is that it's easier for me to see the information and to know the name of each variable. I know that this is called data. I know that this is called first list. This is a nice trick. And now I have it. I have just one array with all the options. Finally, I could remove these duplicates, but I think it's not necessary because I think the dropdown inside Google Sheets do this automatically, so maybe I won't need it. So finally, I'm going to choose the range I'm going to give the data validation. First, I'm going to create the data validation. How do I do it? Spreadsheet up, create new data validation. And then I'm going to build it. Then I'm going to say what type of validation is it. And it will be require value in list. And the list will be this first list. And that's finally, I'm going to build my data validation. And let's store this in a validation rule variable. And this is the validation I'm going to give to my range. The range, it's in the dropdowns sheet from A2 up to the last row it finds. So this will be my dropdown sheet dot get range. The range will be from the second row and the first column up to the last row it finds. This will be dropdown sheet dot get last row. This is the last row it finds in this column. That is actually shouldn't be get last row, but get max rows, because it's up until the last row. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have data. In this case, it's 1,000. Okay, this is why it get max row. This is why it's get max rows. And then I'm going to say dot set data validations, and the data validations will be set data validation without the S, so I can give the same validation to all of them. And then I say validation rule, and that's it. Let's save and let's run. Let's see here, and I have my first dropdown. Nice. Now let's go to the fun part of the video. Here, I'm going to paste this tool. And what I want next is that when I choose Google, I have here a data validation that is all of the tools that correspond to Google. That's it, nothing more. So for now, let's give some comments to this so everything reads nicer. So here, let's say connect to the spreadsheets, to the sheets basically. Here we will create first dropdown, and now let's create our second drop. Actually, this create first dropdown, I think we can separate them into functions. The first one will be create first dropdown, and we can call this once we open the file, for example, or just the first time we are going to do this. Create the first dropdown, or even put it in a menu, we could do that. because we will need to run this again. Now I'm going to copy this and do another function that's called create second dropdown. That is the one that's going to be executing all the time. When I choose here my dropdowns, when I choose Google or Microsoft Office, here is where I want to execute my create second dropdown. The first dropdown is just one time or whenever I want. The second dropdown, it has to run every time someone changes or chooses a different option in the dropdown. Okay, so this doesn't change, this doesn't change. We could do more efficient code leaving this as global variables, but for now, all of these will remain the same. Here is where things start to behave a little bit different. So I'm going to call this first list, I'm going to call it second list, actually to give a bit more of zoom. The second list, first, before doing the map, I need to do a filter, because I'm going to filter all of my data with the things that have the suite, the Google suite. So I need one data I don't have, is the data of the cell the user is on in the moment. So here is data from active cell. For this, there are a couple of methods we could use. The one I like the most is spreadsheet app dot get active. Actually, it's not that. It's spreadsheet dot get active cell. That's it. And I'm going to call this active cell. And from this active cell, I'm going to need a couple of information, some information. The first thing to creating our second dropdown will be the value of that cell. So it's active cell dot get value, and let's store it in a variable called active value. And here I'm going to filter. First, I'm going to cut this. I'm going to filter all of the elements in my row in which the first element, so row in position 0, is Google or whatever. So row in position 0 equals to my active value. Okay, this will be my second list, but now I need to map it. So this is when I can paste this map I had done here, but not in the row 0, but in the row 1, because I need the tool, not the suite. Okay, so row 1. That's it. Now I have my validation rule. This will be my first list, but my second list. And where I'm going to apply it, this was validation. Now I'm not going to apply on all of the range as I did before, but just on the active range. Actually, not on the active range, on the active row. Sorry, here on the active row, but one column to the right. I could do this in a couple of ways. I'm going to say first active row. I need to know the active row. How do I get it? From my active cell, I can ask for get row method. That will be my active row. And secondly, I'm going to need a constant, that is the column of the second dropdown, or dependent dropdown, better yet, dependent dropdown. And here I'm going to call this create dependent dropdown. And the column of my dependent dropdown, for me, it's 2, but maybe for you is 3 or 4 or 5 or 9. So you could also, there is a common notation that is to put this in all caps. Everything that is constant, dependent dropdown. That is let's say a hard-coded value, such as 2. Okay, so now I'm going to do my get range only for one cell. I know the row, that is active row, and I know the column, that is column dependent dropdown. So now I'm just going to say in this row, go to the column dependent dropdown, that is 2 for me, and set the data validation there. And that's it. Let's save and let's run it one time. Something didn't pan out. Let me see. I don't think there's any mistake. No, okay. So I chose it, but I still haven't put the trigger on. So for now, I'm going to run it manually here, create dependent dropdown. Let's see if we have any errors. Apparently not. And here I have the options from Google. Okay, until there, nothing weird. But I'm going to put this inside an onEdit function. So let's do this function onEdit. And inside this, I'm going to put my create dependent dropdown function. And now we can run it from here. We don't have to go to the editor to run it. And it should work. The problem with this is that, for example, when I change something here, it will look at this. There's an error here. I don't know why. The thing is that this is running every time. Every time I edit, when I put this in an onEdit function, this will run create dependent dropdown when I change something here, when I change something here, when I put something here. Look, now I'm creating a weird dropdown here. And if I put something here, it creates another weird dropdown here, you know? So it's crazy. So I need to limit a bit the dropdown. Let's do Control Z a bit. Okay, to eliminate these rows. But every time it changes again, it runs the code again. So I'm going to delete these data validations manually. And now what I need to do is actually not that difficult. I'm going to select the column. As I store the row, I'm going to store also the column. Active column will be active cell dot get column. That's it. And now the active column, now I need to do a conditional. So it will be a conditional that says if active column is, now let's create another constant. That is column first dropdown. Because I only want this to run when I edit the column of the first dropdown. Okay, so if active column is equal to column first dropdown, then I have the go to go. Then another condition I can put is that the sheet should be this source data. So I can store another variable that it's called active sheet, and it will be my active cell dot get sheet. And I could say that active sheet equals to the same dropdown sheet. Drop. Okay, it's the same object. Actually, maybe this won't work. Maybe I should do it with the name. It's better. Active sheet dot get name equals to this same name that again we could store it that in another hard-coded constant such as this. But for now, let's not get crazy. And I'm going to put all of this inside my if. This means first let's format the document. Let's save and let's try it. See if it's still working. Perfect. And now if I change something here or something here or something here, it won't change. Maybe the last thing I needed is that it doesn't work here in the first row, just to make sure, just for fail proof. So let's say that my active row should be greater than 1. That's it. With all of this, now we're doing fine. So up until now, 20 minutes on the video, and I haven't done anything different to what I've done in past videos. What I want to do here is to have an option that is called custom. So this, I could add it in my here, putting here custom, or I could add it directly in my code. So here in my create first dropdown, once I have my first list, I could add one last element with the push method that is called custom. Okay, let's save and let's run our create first dropdown. Maybe we could have a button that regenerates the first dropdown when I want to do something like this. And what this does is that here I have a new option that is called custom. But when I select custom, here it won't bring anything because it won't find anything here with the custom suite. So what I want to do is that when I select custom, I don't want a dropdown. That's it. It's not that difficult. So what I'm going to say is that here, if the active value has to be different than custom. Okay, so now let's put Apple again and excellent. And now let's put custom, and it doesn't do anything, but I would need to erase this. So actually what I'm going to do is to erase this and put another if inside. So I'm going to copy this, cut it, and put another if inside. It's only this condition. If the active value is different than custom, and now that we're at it, also the active value should be different from empty. If those two things happen, then do the dropdown. Else, if it's custom or if it's empty, then delete the value that is there and delete data validation. So this same dropdown sheet get range, I'm going to use it. But now I'm going to tell it two things. The first is to clear the content, erase whatever it has. And second is to clear the data validations, remove any data validations it may have. So let's save and let's test it. So again, here I'm going to put Google, and I have Google. And if I put Apple, and I have Apple. And if I put custom, now I have nothing, and I could write something. And if I delete this, then I also have nothing. But again, if I put Microsoft Office again, then I will have my dropdown. That's it. Not so complicated now. Okay, and we could repeat this in multiple, but for now, this is what I wanted to do, to have a custom option so that you don't always need the dropdown. This is a thing that have been asked for many people, but now one of my Patreons asked it. So here is your video. I hope you like it. And if any else of you find it useful, well, this is what we're for. And you can go to the Patreon page to just use this template immediately if you need it. And if not, just subscribing to the channel is good enough. Thank you to my Patreons. It's great support. Thank you so much. See you next time.